a very important work, any work, not just this particular work, but any work that is concerned and devoted to one thing, rightly dividing the Word of God and bringing forth that which equips the saints, should be put at the forefront when people talk about what they ought to be doing towards, quote-unquote, ministry. Giving is part of that equation. You are not investing in something to get some return. You are storing up treasures in heaven. You are, if indeed you have received the mind of Christ, then the whole idea is you should not have to be coerced. You shouldn't have to be rewarded with some trinket, something on this side that says, oh, here you go, like a cookie for a child that's been good. If that's the type of God that you serve or you think you serve, for me, no thank you. I'd rather go with what the book tells me and the things revealed about God that tell me far better to act in obedience to the things that are emphasized. I'm not talking about somebody who says you got to keep the law or you got to do this or you got to do that, but I am talking about a response to God's word, which every single person is capable, having heard, if the receiver is there, to respond first by hearing the word and saying nothing will drive me away from it. I'll talk about that today. And secondly, by responding in worship. And money is a part of that. Don't ever let somebody say, oh, well, money's something we talk about shamefacedly and, with much distress because somebody might be offended. Well, all the religious charlatans on TV who fancy themselves to be ministry-oriented and word-oriented, how many commercials and how many interruptions and how many gimmicks are sold, all in the name of we have to keep this work, this great work going. Well, wait a minute. If it's God's work and God's people, the church is God's people, you belong to the Lord, then surely there shouldn't have to be any such manipulation by the pastor or the puppeteer, not pulpiteer, to get people to understand this is training for eternity. And if this is training for eternity, you order your life as such, and with great joy, you participate in the things of God. So if you're just listening on the internet or you're just curious, this is how this ministry functions. I don't sell anything in the church here. There isn't anything that we try to tell you, if you do a little bit of this, we'll give you a little bit of that. The whole premise is, what does God's word have to say about the things that technically he's given us in our hand as temporary stewards, and how we treat these things, how he looks on how we treat these things, not on Pastor Scott or Dr. Scott or somebody else's person, but rather how he looks on our stewardship, which, by the way, will be revealed when we all stand, each and every individual will stand to give account of their stewardship. So it's my responsibility to tell you, which I just did right now, there shouldn't be anyone making an excuse and saying, I can't participate. We're going to take up an offering. It's offering time. You may be seated. Please don't answer aloud. Please do not answer with your mouth. Answer in your head. Speak to yourself in your mind. If any person here were to face the sudden need to flee, time of war, time of banishment, being exiled, what do you think you would miss the most once you got to wherever you're going? Don't answer with your mouth, just think in your mind. What do you think you would miss the most? Now, some might think, well, my bed. It's the comfort of my bed, or the four walls that I call home, wherever that is. It might be no walls and park bench. Or maybe it's your loved ones. But I'm wondering how many of you, don't raise your hand, thought first and foremost, I would miss gathering in the house of God. Don't raise your hand. Now, I suppose that, and I can tell you, I do know a few individuals In fact, they're very dear to me, individuals who are listening right now at this very moment, who may be maybe one of the few that fall into this category of being so far away and longing to be in the sanctuary. Biblically, I can think of a few people, not many, but a few. And when I think of individuals like John when he was exiled on the Isle of Patmos for preaching God's word, I wonder if he thought if we could have some fly-on-the-wall report back to us. Was he saying, gosh, I miss that dirt pile I call my bed. I miss the grits at Ephesus. Or the barley cakes. I think while John was in exile, he must have missed the fellowship with the saints, and he must have missed the house of God, although God surely compensated him for being in that lonely place, because it's there that he was given the revelation of the book bearing that name, the book of Revelation, John the Revelator. I think there's other people as well. I'm sure it could be true of the Apostle Paul, locked away in a prison cell, and he doesn't say, make sure that you bring that cushy pillow I'm so missing. Well, he did ask for the cloak, but he said, make sure that you bring the book, the manuscript, the word. So there are definitely people in the Bible who we could set some tone and understand that that was first and foremost in their minds. Now, strangely enough, my message comes out of the Psalms, and I'll give you the background. We'll start in the Psalms, and then we'll go to the background behind the message. But I'm wanting to do this today because of the many weeks of messages that have had more to do with commitment in diverse ways. Committedness of heart, commitment in general. And then there's a mindset. And the mindset is really found in the Psalms. I'll take you to Psalm 63 first, which, if you just read the 11 verses of the Psalm, may not say too much. But for me, it is an expression of something that is expressed both in the Old and the New Testament. Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God. That is to say that there is much more to life than the things that are tangible. And learning to live in that realm, especially when we are people most of the time who live on the mountaintop and not in the valley. I've mentioned this before. It's a little bit more difficult to have that mindset all of the time. Now, because it's only 11 verses, I want to read through the psalm, maybe a little bit laborious, but it's only 11 verses. Then I want to highlight a few things, and then I want to go to the background. So there's a title, a Psalm of David when he was in the wilderness of Judah. And I will tell you, this psalm could have only fit 2 occasions, because there was only twice recorded for us that David was fleeing in the wilderness. One time is when he was fleeing from Saul, and the second time is when he was fleeing from his son Absalom. But if you read the psalm carefully, and specifically because I've gone back to look at it from the Hebrew, one of the verses in here gives away that it can only be when he was being pursued by his son, because of what it says in verse 11, even though the King James does not really read exactly like the Hebrew might reveal, but the king shall rejoice in God. He's speaking of himself. And when Saul was pursuing David, he was not yet king. So this could only fit one moment in time. And it's important for us to get a little bit of the background underneath. But let me first do the reading real quickly. O God, thou art my God. I'm even reading the italics And those people who haven't been with me long enough know the italics are added by the translators when translation is difficult or words are missing to help with the flow most of the time. O God, thou art my God, early will I seek thee. My soul thirsteth for thee, my flesh longeth for thee in a dry and thirsty land where no water is, to see thy power and thy glory, so as I have seen thee in the sanctuary. Because of thy loving kindness is better than life, my lips shall praise thee. Thus will I bless thee while I live. I will lift up my hands in thy name. My soul shall be satisfied as with marrow and fatness. My mouth shall praise thee with joyful lips. When I remember thee upon my bed and meditate on thee in the night watches, because thou hast been my help. Therefore in the shadow of thy wings will I rejoice. My soul followeth hard after thee. Thy right hand upholdeth me. And the psalm now changes a little bit, the last 3 verses. But those that seek my soul to destroy it, they shall go into the lower parts of the earth. They shall fall by the sword. They shall be a portion for foxes. But the king shall rejoice in God. Everyone that sweareth by him shall glory. But the mouth of them that speak lies shall be stopped. Now, let me just kind of say a few things. The background to this, and we're going to go there in a minute, but the background to this in a synopsis is Absalom having spent 4 years essentially winning over the hearts of the people because he was dissatisfied. There were issues, we'll just say, between father and son having the issues with the father, obviously. 4 years of ingratiating himself to the people and essentially setting up what would be tantamount to a secondary kingdom with the attempt to take out the king over in Hebron. Manages to get enough people and mount some form of an army against David. When David is essentially made aware of this, he flees Jerusalem. Now, it's important that I just put this as a footnote because almost every single commentator who's made some commentary on this makes reference to the sanctuary, and the sanctuary per se, referring to the temple, was not yet. But the holy place where the ark was placed, we're going to call that the center of worship. And therefore, when I refer to the sanctuary or the holy place, I'm referring to that place where the ark was, because where the ark was, it was said God's presence was. It's important to distinguish that. David flees with a few of his men, and Absalom, who receives the worst counsel possible, delays in mounting the attack. And that delay essentially cost Absalom the battle because he listened to bad advice. That gave King David, enough time to get together his men. And essentially, in this battle, 20,000 people are taken out, including Absalom, who is fleeing like an animal on the back of an ass and gets caught in a tree. And although David's words were, "Do not harm Absalom," he still loved his son. It is Joab and the warriors that are with Joab that pierce Absalom, killing him. And so the battle is over. But the whole psalm, the background to this, adds a little bit more color when you read these few things. Better than life. Thy loving kindness is better than life. I will bless thee while I live. And those that seek my soul or seek my life to destroy it, they shall go down to the lower parts of the earth. It adds a little bit of color to understand that David was in imminent danger and he knew it. But there are several interesting twists in this story that make it relevant to just get a little bit of the background. So I ask you to turn briefly to 2 Samuel 15:13. Equally of interest while you're turning there, you have Absalom, of course, David's son, Amasa, his nephew, and Ahithophel, his one-time trusted counselor. all banded together. I'm reading from the NIV, so just bear with me. A messenger came and told David, "The hearts of the men of Israel are with Absalom." Then David said to all his officials who were with him in Jerusalem, "Come, we must flee, or none of us will escape from Absalom." It's important that you kind of get the feel of what's going on, the real danger here, because this psalm superimposed over this kind of has some very poignant but very deep concepts about what mindset delightfully, forgive me for using the word delightfully, we might think of having put in David's place, being far away from the place of worship. Essentially, if you can imagine being on the far arid plains, far, far away from Jerusalem, and longing for just one thing, not a comfortable bed, not a pillow, not wives, not concubines, God's presence. And interestingly enough, when we get back into the psalm, you'll see it was not lacking on David's part to have that awareness. And we could definitely learn from this. Back to my reading here. We must leave immediately, or he will move quickly to overtake us and bring ruin upon us and put the city to the sword. The king's officials answered him, "Your servants are ready to do whatever our lord the king chooses." The king set out. With his entire household following him, he left 10 concubines to take care of the palace. He set out with all the people following him, and they halted at a place some distance away. All his men marched past him, along with all the Kerethites and the Pelethites, and 600 Gittites who had accompanied him from Gath marched before the king. The king said to Ittai, the Gittite, "Why should you come along with us? Go back and stay with King Absalom." I love this exchange. He says, "You're a foreigner and an exile from your homeland. You came only yesterday, and today shall I make you wander about with us when I do not know where I'm going? Go back and take your countrymen. May kindness and faithfulness be with you." But Ittai replied to the king, "As surely as the Lord lives, and as the Lord my king lives, wherever my lord the king may be, whether it means life or death, there will your servant be." Now, just as a footnote, this is not part of my message, but just as a footnote, it's too bad that there are not more people who have that mindset. And if you listen to me on Festival, this is the very thing that I was talking about with those people who are so ready to look for something else to follow. I referenced the passage out of John 6, where after the very hard and difficult things, Jesus said some of his disciples began to stop following him because they said, "These are too difficult to hear. These things are too difficult." And some ceased to follow. And the question is, will you go too? And the answer given by one of the disciples is, "Where should we go? Thou hast the words of life eternal." I love the attitude of this man. He says, wherever you go, whether it means life or death, I'm going. Isn't this what Paul said? Basically, the king was the highest realm for these people. Isn't this what Paul said in Romans? He said, "Who shall separate us?" Now, we're talking about an earthly king, but I'm talking about the connection with that representative, the one that God gave to represent him to the people. Who shall separate us? Angels, demons, life, death, whatever might come. Who shall separate us from that great and wonderful and loving God we serve? So you think about this. Even a man who just came along, who wasn't part of the equation, we'll call him a Gentile outcast. He says, "Oh no, I'm with you." God, give me people like this that understand that there is something to be said for those people who stay by the stuff and know what exactly their calling is when they're called to a place. Even though it may not make sense on the surface, you stay by the stuff. Give me some people like this, Lord, and I'll be a happy, happy woman. David said to Ittai, "Go ahead, march on." So Ittai the Gittite marched on with all of his men and the families that were with him. The whole countryside wept aloud as all the people passed by. The king also crossed the Kidron Valley and all the people moved toward the desert. And here's an interesting passage that will tie into the psalm as well. Zadok was there too, and all the Levites who were with him were carrying the Ark of the Covenant. They set down the Ark, and Abiathar offered sacrifices until all the people had finished leaving the city. Then the king said to Zadok, "Take the Ark of God back into the city. If I find favor in the Lord's eyes, he will bring me back and let me see it and his dwelling place again. But if he says, I am not pleased with you, then I am ready. Let him do to me whatever seems good to him." Now, this is a major milestone even in the Old Testament. You see, that ark symbolized always the presence of God. They carried it everywhere in the wilderness with them. When Moses built and the priesthood was formed, they carried it everywhere, and God's presence dwelled on that mercy seat between the outstretched wings. And so it always had the symbol of God's presence. So to say, send the ark back, said two things. Even though he says, if he's pleased with me, it'll be so, and if not, I accept what's coming my way. It said, we'll read it back in the psalm, essentially, I know God's going to be with me. I know the Lord's presence will be with me, number one. And number two, interestingly enough, although it is David who brought the ark, and it's David who wanted to build a house for the ark, to house the ark, interestingly enough, it's this one section right here that has a New Testament value to it, which is, while this old dispensation was steeped in all the things that could be touched, that were relevant to the ark and relevant to the tabernacle and the things that could be seen, here is a statement of faith that says, send it back. And essentially, I don't need the ceremonial portion to be with me. A complete act, I want to say, of New Testament faith to send the ark back. Because essentially, without the faith to say the Lord will be with me, it was like saying you're sending God's presence away. But that wasn't the mind of David, which is super interesting, right in the middle of nowhere. And so it says, also the king said to Zadok, the priest, aren't you a seer? Go back to the city in peace with your son Ahimaaz and Jonathan, son of Abiathar. You and Abiathar take your two sons with you. I will wait at the fords in the desert until word comes from you to inform me. So they took the ark of God back to Jerusalem and stayed there. David continued up the Mount of Olives weeping as he went. His head was covered and he was barefoot. And all the people with him covered their heads too and were weeping as they went up. And this is so interesting because, again, we're putting some emotional depth on the psalm because these two things coincide, these two moments coincide. But I can just imagine, and I'm imagining now, what must have been going through the mind of David if I'm going by the psalm and what I'm reading here. That complete act of faith to send the ark back, but yet such a natural reaction, a natural situation. It's like God doesn't whitewash anything here. To have David weeping as he goes, I can only imagine what he's thinking as he gets further and further away from the place, Jerusalem, not just forget about the palace, the place where the epicenter of his whole life and being, which centered around God. The further away he went, how he wept. Now, remember, I started by asking you, how many of you, if you were forced to be exiled, what would be the first thing that you would think of? And I go back to the psalm, because don't go back to the psalm just yet, but I've got my Bible open to the psalm. And just the few verses that open the psalm. O God, thou art my God, early will I seek thee, my soul thirsteth for thee, my flesh longeth for thee in a dry and thirsty land where there is no water, to see thy power and thy glory. So I have seen thee in the sanctuary. And that technically is the holy place, not necessarily sanctuary as in tent, but the holy place, longing for what he had already beheld. As he went, he's now sent away the ark, weeping as he goes. And it says, David arrived at the summit where the people used to worship God. All of these things like reminders of how it used to be, the way things used to be. And I can only imagine the heart welling up. Now think of this. He's in the driest wilderness, the worst place. My soul thirsteth for thee, my flesh longeth for thee in a dry and thirsty land where there is no water. What I wouldn't give God to have you, although the statement of what I just talked about, the ark, says a mouthful, but what I wouldn't give to have your presence here and to have your power and your glory, just like what I have seen of old now. So it says, when he arrived at the summit, where the people used to worship God, Hushai, the Archite, was there to meet him, his robe torn, dust on his head. David said to him, if you go with me, you will be a burden to me. But if you return to the city, say to Absalom, I will be your servant. And so he's essentially sending him back. And David's friend, he sends him back, Hushai, arrived at Jerusalem, where Absalom was entering the city. The following chapter essentially is all about how, in the process, David will encounter certain people. Some of them are meeting him with kindness. Others are meeting him with cursings. And if you keep going forward a little bit, you'll find that finally, and I'm jumping forward because otherwise we'll be here reading the whole day, there's a whole pursuit that's happening. And now I'm already in chapter 17. The whole unfolding of this, if you have time in your own time, is chapters 15 through 19 that tell about Absalom's rebellion. But I'm now, as I said, in chapter 17. And I'll begin reading at verse 21. After the men had gone, the two climbed out of the well because she hid them, covered them up to inform King David. They said to him, set out, cross the river at once. Ahithophel has advised such and such against you. So there's still imminent danger. David and all the people with him set out and crossed the Jordan. By daybreak, no one was left who had not crossed the Jordan. So we're talking about some serious stuff. The people are fleeing, being chased down. And the anomaly of all this is that David is king. Many other things could have happened, but they're all fleeing. When Ahithophel, remember that used to be the trusted advisor of David, when he saw that his advice wasn't followed, he went home, put his house in order, and hung himself. That's an interesting Judas parallel. David went to Mahanaim, verse 24, and Absalom crossed the Jordan with all the men of Israel. Absalom had appointed Amasa over the army in place of Joab. And Amasa was the son of a man, Jether, which I said nephew, David's nephew. David came to Mahanaim, Shobi the son of Nahash from Rabbah of the Ammonites, and Machir the son of Amiel from Lodabar, and Barzillai the Gileadite from Rogelim brought bedding and bowls and articles of pottery. They also brought wheat and barley, flour, roasted grain, beans and lentils, honey and curds, sheep, cheese from cows, milk for David and his people to eat, for they said the people have become hungry and tired and thirsty in the desert. David mustered the men who were with him, appointed over them commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds. David sent troops out, a third under the command of Joab, a third under Joab's brother Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, a third under Ittai the Gittite. The king told the troops, I myself will surely march out with you. But the men said, you must not go. If we are forced to flee, they won't care about us. Even if half of us die, they won't care. But you are worth 10,000 of us. It would be better now for you to give us the support from the city. The king answered, I will do whatever seems best to you. And again, the mindset to protect the king. Anything can happen to us, but You're the most important person here. We must protect you. To have a band of people like that, and to have David's heart, and I'll just fast forward because I don't want to run out of time. But essentially, David tells all of his men essentially to not hurt Absalom. And I've given you the end of the story. Absalom, while fleeing on a mule, runs into a tree branch, and is essentially left there hanging alive, and it's Joab and his men that will finish the job. Now, back to the psalm. Because all of that paints the dire situation of him being separated from the place he loved so well, the fear of Jerusalem being attacked and wiped out. But most importantly, and there are certain things here that are noteworthy. I didn't know which place to emphasize first because they all seem so relevant. But in David's distress, and I really pray you go back and read the whole unfolding of Absalom's rebellion in your own time, because it really puts the depth, it puts some perspective to the writing of this psalm and gives it a greater understanding. To be separated from the place of worship for David was the worst. To be separated, to be exiled away, missing that which was, we'll call it the epicenter of his life. And I say this as something that to me is very important because it is perspective. As I've said, these last few weeks have been messages on stewardship and commitment. I'm not saying that we all can take a page out of David's life, but we can certainly learn and certainly try and understand some things that made David, the term used, a man after God's own heart. The idea here is, in whatever state he was in, the thing he contented himself in was the Lord. And never once here, it's kind of interesting, there is no petition in this psalm that is, some of the psalms are petition for something specific and then praise. But interestingly enough, this has more praise in it on the backdrop of such a crucial, desperate story that I wonder how many of us, if we were forced to flee, would still have this mindset. Now, interestingly enough, back in history, specifically the Greek church made this psalm a psalm to be read early in the morning based on the fact that from the earliest texts, the opening verse that says, "Early will I seek thee," is sometimes translated at dawn, and they made this a reading that they would read in the early morning. But the most important thing is that he says he will seek, and how his entire being, soul thirsting, flesh longing for thee in a dry land where there is no water, to see thy power and thy glory. I saw this before somewhere. I saw your power. I saw your entering in to all things in my life. I'm vacillating now between David and between you. I saw it once before, Lord. I'm still in this wilderness place. And maybe we're not in exile or in great danger like David was, but I want you to think of this because it's a mindset that goes very far with God. I know what I saw before. I know what, forgive me, I don't like to talk about experience because that's kind of a subjective thing, but I know what I have experienced before. Isn't this a little bit like you've heard or read, restore me to that spirit, restore me to that place, restore me to that mindset? But yet here it's talking about what I've already seen in the past. So as I have seen thee. I witnessed it before. I saw your goodness before. I saw what you did before. I need it now, Lord. Now, if there's any petition, it's for God's presence. Because thy loving kindness is better than life. That word in the Hebrew, chesed, I've described this before as an unconditional love. Can you imagine that? The love of God is better than life. Now think about this, because you can read right by this. I have many times. He gives me life. He's the giver of life. His love in my life, in fact, is more important than my life, is what David was saying, and it's what every single saint should be, at some point it should be on their breath. The love of God, we know the love of God is shed abroad in our hearts by the Holy Spirit, but the love of God, His love to us, is better than life. Why? Because He's the giver of life. How much more? Now, kind of remove all of the mental roadblocks off of this, and you read it and you realize there's something extremely profound about just that one utterance. He says, my lips shall praise Thee. So we have great worship here. Thus I will bless Thee while I live. While I am alive, I will praise You. Not, oh Lord, if You get me out of this danger in the wilderness, then I'll praise You. Oh Lord, if You just take care of my debts and You just heal whatever's wrong with me, then I'll praise You. I'll praise You now, while I live. See, this is the tragedy. We can have great faith, and a lot of times we forget that coupled with that great faith is the power of the mouth to give praise, thankfulness, not just for deliverance. There is no record here as of yet, although the last few verses of the psalm, they are essentially being things that have not yet happened, which he's essentially saying God will do, He'll take care of. So it's praise in advance. I will lift up my hands in Thy name. We've got worship, want, I desire, I thirst for Thee, the want, the worship. And then it says, my soul shall be satisfied as with marrow and fatness. My mouth shall praise Thee with joyful lips. It's kind of interesting. Satisfied as, think of the most fulfilling thing that one could have. I'll be satisfied with God, in, by, and with God, singing. When I remember Thee upon my bed and meditate on Thee in the night watches, because Thou hast been my help, therefore in the shadow of Thy wings will I rejoice. Here's another pattern. My soul followeth hard after Thee. That's walking, we're not necessarily saying walking with God, but walking after God. That is desiring to walk with Him. My soul followeth hard after Thee. Thy right hand upholdeth me. Now, go back to what I just read. Fleeing, in danger, peril, that he and all of his company, this might be it. And these are the words that he pens. Now, it's staggering to me because there are other Psalms where David was in peril and he wrote differently. This is staggering because right here, through and through, he is saying, I'm satisfied with You, Lord. Your presence, Your power, it's all I need. I'll get through this thing. Essentially, there is no, if You get me out of here, but I'll tell you, forgive me for doing it like this. Lord, I want You. I worship You. My work is to praise You. I'm walking with You. And I don't mean as in I'm by Your side, but if it means simply just clinging and following in the pathway that You've paved for me, that's my focus. Now, I wrote down some interesting notes about how this, if you read through this psalm, you can see something really interesting. I have seen Thee, past tense. Your love is better than, Your loving kindness is better than life, present. And my soul shall be satisfied, that's verse 5, future. It's almost as though if you were to pull this apart, there's a statement about what He knows, what God's track record is in the past, a statement of the present, and something about the future. You know, if you think about it, the future one's pretty interesting. My soul will be satisfied. Think of marrow and fatness, the thing that could on earth satisfy you the most beyond that. My soul shall be satisfied with that, Lord, which is you. And then the entire person. I put these down because I noted something. He talks about his lips giving praise, his tongue blessing, hands lifted up, his will, the mouth shall praise, the memory, the mind, the memory, verse 6, when I remember, and meditation, which is also of the mind. The entire person is being encompassed here in expression of gratitude and praise and worship. And I think sometimes when we think about praise, we simply think about opening the mouth and thank you, Lord. But here, the entire being is mentioned here. And it's at the backdrop of the most dire and desperate circumstance. In other words, it's almost a contradiction. And isn't that what the Christian is? Isn't that what Paul said when he talked about being buffeted but not knocked down? He talked about the almost knocked out but not quite. There's a whole chapter of things that describe how he suffered many things, but yet nothing could ever sway him from his love and commitment to being that ambassador for Christ. So here we have this man in the wilderness, and then I want to finish this with the 3 verses because they're so interesting. The 3 last verses, 9, 10, and 11, they're so interesting. Universally, almost every commentator seems to think that these were added on at the end and that they should have never been there. And whoever came up with this idea is very confused about the understanding of David's mindset. And I'll tell you why. When he says, those that seek my soul, those that are seeking to destroy my life, to kill me, to destroy it, shall go into the lower parts of the earth. A statement of God vindicating. That's a statement of faith. That's not a statement of doom on David's part. That's a statement of faith. The Lord's going to take care of my enemies for me. That's number 1. So the destiny of his enemies. They shall fall by the sword. They shall be a portion for foxes. Now, I want you to think about this in the framework of the Old Testament. To be left, to be consumed by animals would be the worst type of, to not have a proper burial would be the worst punishment meted out to somebody. So when he says they shall fall by the sword, they shall be a portion for foxes, these enemies, their destiny is to be devoured and to be the lowest. I mean, even a criminal could be properly buried, but the worst punishment, to be devoured by animals. But the king shall rejoice in God. Everyone that sweareth by him shall glory, but the mouth of them that speak lies shall be stopped. Here's something that has not yet happened. By the way, those falling by the sword or those going into the lower parts, that had not yet happened. Yet he says all of these things God's going to do. And if you really think about it, these 3 verses take you right back to the beginning of when he was in the wilderness of Judah. That's why I like the Bible. It doesn't try and make it sound like now he's okay and everything's great and he's on the mountaintop. Back to reality now. Reality is that there is still impending doom. Reality is there are still troubles. Reality is there's still something on my heels, but God is going to take care of it for me. And I thought, in the midst of trying to tell people about commitment and the difficulty, and we know it's difficult. Anybody who says being a Christian is easy is a lunatic, especially if you are following and the difficulty of being in the world with all of the trappings and with all the things that you could be like David, feeling like you're being hunted down and tracked repeatedly. I want you to remember this. This mindset, I'm sure if you go back and you keep reading this psalm, you will find more and more in it. The more you read it, the more you circle words, you'll find more and more in it to give an idea that if we are living in a place that we might call dry and barren, which is the world, if you're not living according to the world, then what you see around you is a lot of barrenness and a lot of dryness. Instead of lamenting about that which is the thing that's seen, how about praising the unseen? How about talking about the goodness of God to be with you, and He is with you in the midst of that place you're calling your wilderness? I once preached a message, I don't know if you remember, about the mirage. You know, somehow we're out there and we think we see something. We get to it and it's really not what it is, but the thing in the Bible is that which we perceive it will be. It shall become a pool in the midst of dryness, in the midst of the things that are not. It shall become something as long as we keep faithing and keep holding on to the promises of God. Here's one that says, does not matter what you or I are going to go through. It matters in the sense of these are life experiences, but what matters most is the attitude. And here, he didn't say, food first. He didn't say, I need the comfort first. He said, I'm thirsty for God's presence. I'm longing, my body and soul, my flesh and my spirit. I'm craving that, even far away from the comforts of home, that I need the most to survive. I wish to God that this could be the prayer of every single person listening to me today, because it's so easy to get caught up in living in the now and not having a hunger and not having a thirst for God. Now, in the New Testament, you have the woman at the well, and Jesus saying, whoever drinks of this water, speaking of himself, shall never thirst again. And it's easy to get into the mindset of thinking, well, you know, I don't have to keep working on this mindset. It's really like what Dr. Scott said about, you know, fortunately, a lot of you got rid of those alarm clocks or shut them off, but people used to have their alarms going off all the time in here and downtown, even while Dr. Scott was preaching. And I reminded myself, people took what he said, literally setting a watch for themselves to remind them to practice an awareness of God's presence. And that's wonderful, as long as you don't do it in the sanctuary. Because I'll do that for you. That's what I'm here for. But my point is, the same making yourself aware, that same mindset that is to remind yourself of God's presence, which, by the way, is a help for those people who tend to think when temptation comes, they're alone in the temptation. No, they're not alone in the temptation. If you're practicing an awareness of God's presence, He's there with you in the moment that you're being tempted. Think of these things. He's there with you in the moment that you perceive as you look around that you're in a wilderness. Now, I don't think any of us have suffered what David has suffered and went through. But what an incredible lesson to think about this. Another 3 concepts I circled were soul thirsting for thee, my soul shall be satisfied, and my soul followeth hard after thee. These 3 things that speak of desiring God. Now, you can't give someone an appetite if they don't have it. And believe me, I've tried to force feed a couple of people in my life. I'm talking about this, mind you, not actual, not food, but this spiritual. I've tried. I'm going to confess to you right now, I'm guilty of that. I've tried to make some people want to have an appetite for God's word. You can't give that. Just as much as you can't make somebody desire God. You can't make somebody get this mindset. I'm going to tell you something at some point will click in somebody's brain and say, I have not yet had that. You know, you get a hankering for something. You ever crave potato chips? Oh, I got to have potato chips, right? Whatever, it's the salt or it's the potatoes, I don't know, but you got to have it. Well, how come that same craving doesn't come to you for the things of God and God Himself? Can you tell me that? Because that's essentially what this psalm is painting a picture of. A man who understands the relevance and the importance and the need, and his desire is this, to see God's power again. I know I've seen it, Lord, show it to me again. I know I've personal experience. I've experienced it, Lord. I need it again. But not as in, if you get me out of here, Lord, I'm going to praise you anyway. I'm going to praise you no matter what. You know, the last 3 verses are important to me for one reason, because I realize that in my lifetime, I had to live years. I don't think I ever had enemies until I took the pulpit and started pastoring this church. I think of it that way. And for many years, it was a disturbing thing to me. Why? And I really do understand. But even this is a comfort to me, because David putting this in the past says, essentially, and he's still speaking to me and he's speaking to you, the words minister to me, they should minister to you. God's going to take care of those people. What were the words to David regarding God's person? Touch not God's anointed. God's still saying the same thing. If these are mine, and he's not just referring to a minister. He says, I'm going to keep you as the apple of my eye. If you are his, don't worry. He's going to take care of the ones who are not abundantly hating you, but abundantly hating him. And this is what these 3 verses speak to me at the end here. God's going to take care of your enemies. So let's go back to the praise part and understand that the person who's in distress, the person who's in a moment of crisis. Now let me ask the question kind of in reverse. In that moment, what were your first act or reaction to the crisis or the distress? This is a hard thing, because the natural person and the flesh immediately say, oh, I don't know how I'm going to bear this thing. What am I going to do? How's it going to work out? It's not just Gideon with the vocabulary of doubt. It's, holy cow, the whole world is crashing in, or I'm in a wilderness place and I've got disaster coming for me for certain. Lord, I'm going to praise you in the storm. I'm going to look at this psalm and I'm going to let it be the guiding portion that tells me your love in my life is better than my life. And your guidance and your care and your provision, all the things that you offer, I'm going to praise you. I'm not going to praise you right now because of something that I'm asking you to do. I'm going to praise you because I know who you are and you're with me. And no matter what, even if it looks like the shadow of the valley of death and you think there's just no way, begin to praise God, even if it's difficult at the first. And God will honor the thing that is coming out of your mouth. Not so much as to say, you see, I did this for you to do that, but rather, I know in whom I have believed. I know in whom I've placed my trust. I know one thing. I may have to go through a bunch of valleys. Dr. Scott's famous probably for his teaching on Psalm 84, blessed men go through valleys of weeping, but they don't stay in them. At some point, that valley gets turned into a spring. It gets turned into a place of blessing for others. Well, how about one man here in peril saying, I need your presence, and I love you for your love on me and everything that you've brought into my life. I'm praising you. I will bless you while I have breath in my lungs. What's the last psalm in the Psalter? I will praise the Lord, all of my being. Let all creation praise him. Well, we don't always. And usually we praise him after he's done something for us, after we've received something. We say, oh, thank you, Lord, for doing this thing. Well, how about acting in faith in advance and saying, thank you, Lord, beforehand, and finding the reasons, if you need any. I would just say, first and foremost, the Lord is with me. I want to go through the names of God even, doing that. Emmanuel, the with us God, he is with me. You start going through the promises of God and you find he'll never leave me nor forsake me. I can find abundant places to reach in the book and say, no matter what the desert place and the wilderness is, no matter what enemies, no matter what friends, the Lord and his presence are what's important to me. Now, we're not in exile. Too bad that some have to suffer that pain of separation to think again on God's gathering place for his people and the joy that is here when all the saints are gathered in one place rejoicing. Too bad we have to read about this one being removed, or I think about a few of the saints here who are far away and removed, and who would do anything to be back here in the sanctuary worshiping with us today. Well, the Lord is with you, the Lord is with me, and the promise that David is raising up right here is good for all of us to take hold of. Praise is not just for when God does. Praise is for something that we look around, we see dire impossibilities, and yet we know, I serve the God of impossibilities. My God can do anything. I can take the worst and I can take the best if I know the Lord is with me, His promise to me and His promise to you, and the vindication that He gives ultimately over my life and yours. So I'm going to say with you, maybe this is a place for us to start desiring God with this psalm and the background. Maybe today will be the day you say, I'm going to start giving Him praise instead of asking every day for things and waiting and petitioning. Maybe I'm going to start my day by giving Him praise, not for the things He has yet to do, but the things He's already done. Not for the things that I'm asking Him for, but the things that are, and not for the things that I really don't need, but for the one thing that I know He's already given me. The presence that He's given through His Spirit, and that He's with me, and He'll never forsake me. That's my message. I'm Pastor Melissa Scott, pastor of Faith Center, Glendale, California. I teach every Sunday morning at 11 a.m. If you'd like to attend services with us, simply call the 800 number, that is 800-338-3030, to join us. If you'd like to watch, listen, and learn 24 hours a day, simply log on to our website at www.pastormelissascott.com.